Okay, this video is called Unlocking Longevity, Going Beyond Diet and Exercise. Yeah, because we all heard a lot of talk about diet and exercise. We know low-fat vegan's the best with no oil. Okay, avoiding estrogenic chemicals. I've talked about that a lot. And a couple big things. Number one, filter your water. Whole house carbon filter is ideal. In the shower, it's nice to have like a fluoride filter if you're on municipal tap water that's fluoridated. In the kitchen, good to have a reverse osmosis filter. Best is beneath the kitchen sink. You can get a cheaper one put on top of the kitchen countertop, but it's a little bit of a pain in the butt. You got to add water to it every day. You want to avoid drinking water out of plastic bottles. Much better to have a reverse osmosis at home and store it in a glass bottle. Second option would be stainless steel. More and more concern these days about microplastics being present in high amounts in these bottled waters, for example. It's also how you wrap your food. Better to store food in the fridge in glass containers. I actually stopped using my water pick, even though I liked it. I was becoming addicted to it at night to clean my teeth because I'm worried about the pressurized water in there going through all that plastic container, plastic tubing, and sometimes sitting in there for a while as well. Another thing too is it's good to avoid these personal care products to the extent you can. I'm bald obviously, but I got a little hair on the side. You don't need shampoo. It made no difference if I use it or not, so I stopped using shampoo. The only personal care product I use is this thin, transparent soap, the simplest one with the fewest ingredients, because they all tend to have estrogenic preservatives, estrogenic chemicals like parabenzoic acids, parabens. They're a combination of a phenol. It's like with a benzene ring. It's got good shelf life stability, good antimicrobial ability, so it's in everything. It's all the personal care products. So, I don't like putting lotion on myself. Like Rodney Dangerfield said, there's a fine line between rubbing lotion on yourself and rubbing yourself with lotion. You don't need that stuff. You don't need sunscreen unless you work outside all day. I just wear a sweatshirt or something if I'm going to be out there a prolonged amount of time. I haven't had a problem with that, or a sombrero. When my family and I went to the beach in Puerto Rico, my family refused to sit by me. My kids were embarrassed because I had a sweatshirt on and a sombrero on the beach in Puerto Rico. Anyways, if you use don't cook with oil, you don't need dishwasher detergent. You don't need laundry detergent. I haven't used it for decades without any problems. Let's see, what else? Beware of the dentist. The dentists will put toxic stuff in your mouth, almost like they don't even know how to use anything that's non-toxic. They don't like pure plastic stuff because they say it doesn't have good enough endurance, doesn't last long enough, but then they make alloys and they mix it typically with some toxic metal like aluminum oxide. Aluminum's a neurotoxin. They claim it doesn't break out of there, but how could that be if the plastic is fragile and you're chewing on it and it breaks apart? I don't know. Mercury amalgams are toxic. They got mercury in them. Okay. The other thing toxic in water, if you don't filter, it's aluminum. That's a neurotoxin. It's a fertility toxin. It's toxic to your gut, causes leaky gut. Mitochondrial inhibitor, there's tons of them and they're real common. These heavy metals, I'll never eat a processed food because almost all of them have some type of contaminant and often a heavy metal. I only eat organic to avoid all the glyphosate, atrazine. Atrazine's an estrogenic. Glyphosate's a mitochondrial inhibitor. Atrazine's a mitochondrial inhibitor too. Lots of medications are mitochondrial inhibitors, so take as few as you can. Excitotoxins, we talked about that. That's things like caffeine, glyphosate's an excitotoxin, aspartame's. That means they're like a mild stimulant. They increase the brain cells' metabolic rate. You don't want that because you have to match that with oxygen and glucose delivery. And if you have baseline atherosclerosis, overtreated hypertension, vasoconstrictors like caffeine and psychological stress and sleep deprivation, it's harder to meet those metabolic demands. You run more of a risk of brain cells by supply and demand theory of me, the Peter Rogers, MD, supply and demand theory of brain degeneration, not meeting those demands, and brain cells going into apoptosis, programmed cell death, because they can't meet their metabolic needs. Avoid EMF as best you can. You don't want to buy a house under a power line. Use your speakerphone on your cell phone rather than hold it to your face as much as possible. Don't put it in your chest pocket. A couple of decades of that, you got increased risk of breast cancer. Don't put it in your front pocket. It's a low-power microwave. You microwave your balls, okay? You want to lower your testosterone that way? It's stupid. I don't like back pocket either for it because it's right next to your rectum. You might increase your risk of rectal cancer. You do that for a couple of decades. Don't have a Wi-Fi router right next to you. If I am at a stoplight, I won't stop underneath the power line. I'll deliberately avoid red lights where you would have to do that. I'll just change my route to drive to or from my JOB. Okay, street violence, it's become worse and worse because they've opened up the the thing that's called the the border. Okay, so in a lot of Western countries, that's a bigger and bigger problem. Avoid it as best you can. Sunshine, get your sunlight. Humans are made to walk around in extended family groups outside, getting their exercise, getting their sunshine, helping each other. So we're made for that. A couple things, right when you first wake up, it's good to try to see some sunshine. Open the shades on your window, take a quick look outside. Try to get some of that sunlight. It helps set your circadian rhythms that this is morning, because our ancestor populations for thousands of generations woke up with the sun and went to bed with the darkness of the night. There are some benefits of red light, near infrared light, which is a big part of the visual light spectrum for the red light, near infrared light from the sunlight spectrum. And basically, those do multiple favorable things. They've been shown to increase the so-called easy water, exclusion zone water, glycocalyx water, to better protect and stabilize your endothelium, the lining of your blood cells. So they're good. It's good in that way. Releases nitric oxide precursors from your subcutaneous tissue to get you to vasodilate. That's part of why it feels good. It activates cytochrome C oxidase on the inner mitochondrial membrane to cause increased production of melatonin in your mitochondria themselves. It turns out we used to always think of melatonin is produced by the pineal gland, but only about 5% of melatonin is produced by the pineal gland. The other 95% is produced intrinsic within the mitochondria, and especially this is activated by red light, near infrared light during the daytime. At night, you more go by the pineal gland melatonin that's produced. Okay, but that's an important point. So you want to get your sunlight. If you take hospital patients, I have one on the sunny side, one on the shaded side of the hospital. The sunny side of patients, in general, get well much faster. You take tuberculosis patients, you put them outside, they get better faster. Florence Nightingale knew this way back in the mid-1800s. They've actually redesigned hospitals since the 1800s, early 1900s versus the modern world. They used to have outdoor balconies and porches and places, solariums to take the patients, because they knew the patients did better if you do that. Nowadays, they pretend that everything is based on drugs, and they keep the patients indoor with locked windows. There's suicide windows, they have them locked so they can't jump out, versus they don't take them out in the sun. You almost never see that. I've actually, that's something you don't see, but it would be better for the patients if there was more of that. Okay, what else? The red light, near infrared light, appears to fluidize the liquid in the mitochondrial matrix adjacent to ATP synthase. That's complex 5, because it changes from a gel phase, the fourth phase of water, into a liquid phase. So that's another positive benefit. So it does a lot of good things for you. Get out when you can. But on the other hand, I'm also going to tell you, all the sunlight stuff is kind of new and it's getting hyped up a lot. Red light therapy, there do appear to be some real benefits from it, but things always get overhyped in the beginning. And I can just tell you, I've known a lot of lawnmower guys. I never saw one of them become a genius from spending time in the sun all day. I never saw a lifeguard, all of a sudden become a genius and start quoting Shakespeare, okay? So it's helpful. But another thing I saw, I'm currently reading a book about red light. They emphasize that it tends to help the tissue areas that need help the most. Like it helps to accelerate healing within a wound, okay? But it doesn't necessarily increase mitochondrial function that dramatically in the other parts of your body. So it's not going to turn somebody into a genius or into a pro athlete, but it does seem to have benefits, and it's definitely good for us to get sunlight. There's much lower, there's lower levels of cancer. Lots of the metastatic cancer super survivors for decades I've seen all lived, relatively down south in Hawaii or Australia or California or somewhere warm, so they got more sunshine. There's also blue blocker light. So at night you want to minimize blue light. I got these blue blocker glasses because I was having some trouble sleeping. I think it's because I stressed out. I had some stressful things in my personal life. But if you're going to get blue blocker glasses, you want to get definitely the more yellow tinted ones. If they're clear and untinted, that's a sign that they're bogus. At the minimum, they should be tinted this way to minimize the blue light, because our brain perceives blue light as being daytime. We've got special photoreceptors in our eyes that really just sense blue light, and they send a message to our brain when there's blue light that it is daytime. The point being is you don't want bright lights in your house. Nowadays, most lights people buy are LED lights, and the typical one is the blue version. They're cheap, they're energy efficient in terms of the amount of electricity they use to produce light, but that blue light running in your house in the evening shuts off your melatonin production and makes it harder for you to sleep. It'll decrease your sleep drive such that you'll go to sleep, but you won't stay asleep as long. You're more likely to wake up and not be able to go back to bed. And I sometimes have had that problem. And some of the things that you can do, dim the lights in your house in the evening, especially the 3 hours before you go to bed. Buy lower wattage light bulbs, preferentially if you can. Get rid of your LED lights, especially the blue LED lights, and buy instead a red light or halogen lights, incandescent bulbs, because they're very low in blue light as a component of their spectrum. Because you take white light and you run it through a prism. It's a whole bunch of different things in the spectrum. So the old-fashioned halogen and incandescent bulbs are very low in blue. Also, we weren't bothered by a fire or a candle light. Partly because they come from below. It's better for the light to come from below because it hits the top of your retina, and that part is not so photosensitive to blue light. It's more the bottom of your retina, as if the light were coming from the sun and from looking up at the sky. So it's better to have a light on the ground. Also, at night, I'll put a little lamp with a weak wattage bulb so I can just navigate, my household area, but I won't put the ceiling lights on. I don't want anything from overhead. Again, because you get more blue light sensitization that way to try to sleep better. Avoid negative people as much as you can. Avoid negative videos to the extent you can. You can't completely avoid negative people and things in your day. Manage your stress. The other thing I found will help me is if I exercise. If I do a little strenuous exercise during the day, I sleep significantly better at night. Avoid, of course, caffeine and other stimulants of that type. Be careful about taking naps because that'll drop down your adenosine so you won't have as much sleep drive when you eventually go to bed, hit the sack, so to speak. Limit the bedroom for only 2 things. It should be for sleeping and for making the 2-back beast. Don't do other things in there. Don't have any electronics in your bedroom. Let's see, what else? Go to bed earlier. That's usually the key thing because we tend to wake up at the same time every day. So if you can get to bed earlier, you'll get some more sleep. Don't drink too much water at night because then you'll have to wake up to void more often. Let's see, what else? Avoid caffeine. Let's see. You can substitute beet juice as a good energy provider. Instead of caffeine, it doesn't have that stimulant effect. Avoid all the stupid stuff like tobacco, alcohol, marijuana. You should never touch those things. I realize sometimes you're forced at a party to, hold it in your hand, but I'd recommend don't even drink it. It's crap. Grounding is an option. Ideally to walk in the wet sand by the ocean, but few of us have that option. You get negative electrons. The earth has a negative charge in it, which is electrons, and the negative charge comes up through your foot if you're barefoot and comes into your body, and it's thought to distribute itself around your body to have a positive effect on your endothelial glycocalyx, for example. Okay. I have a grounding mat that I'll use, in the evening. I'll be barefoot. I'll have my feet on it. I like it. So it's grounded to an electrical outlet. Let's see. Air pollution in your house. It's good to have an air filter. It's ideal to live in a country area where it's not that crowded and you got good, fresh air outdoors rather than, next to a farm where they're spraying crap on the farm, or if you're living in a busy city. Try not to live near a busy street if you can. Try not to live near a smelly factory or a crematorium or a coal-burning electrical plant. In your house, like I said, try to have a good air filter, even potentially buy your own personal air filter besides what you put in the furnace filter. Religion helps people. All people practicing the major religions, they're significantly healthier than non-religious people. It helps to give meaning to life. It helps to reduce your stress, give it over to God, so to speak. Helps to motivate a person to be your best self, like a lot of artists, they create as, to honor God. Bach wrote that in every composition, to the glory of God. Michelangelo, I put all my trust in God and create for him. Isaac Newton, he said, all my scientific questions have been answered as an answer to prayer. Okay, he spent more of his time studying the Bible than he did doing science. It's good to have a sense of purpose in your life because no matter what you do, life kind of beats you down. You can't avoid the sad things in life, my parents died. I was very sad about that. There was nothing I could do. I was pissed off that I hadn't learned more of these medical things earlier. I would have been able to help them more. So what I'm trying to say is you're not going to avoid all the sad things that happen in life. I got divorced. I didn't want to be divorced. I wanted to keep my family together, but my wife did not want to. So that made me sad, okay? You can't completely avoid those things. But what you can do is you can pick a mission for your life. If you're a coach, to be a better coach. If you're a teacher, to be a better teacher. For me, it was to be the best doctor in the world, okay? And I am, okay? Don't get me wrong. I got some competition, but I'm working on it. And some people say I shouldn't say that, but I do because it's the truth, and that's what I try to do, and be a unifier of faith and reason, because I think they totally go together, like modern Thomas Aquinas, like Aristotle. And the reason I like all that is because it makes me more resilient. No matter when people insult me, troll me, badmouth me, or do things unfair or whatever to me, I say, you know what? I know what I'm here for. And I tell that to my girlfriend. She'll be like, why don't you want to go to the water park with me? You're so selfish. I say, no, I got things to do. I have to write a book chapter today, and that's my priority. And my wife would call me names, you're autistic, all these other things. I'm saying, no, today I have to write a book chapter about whatever subject it was, my supply and demand theory of brain degeneration or whatever it might be. But I know from a fact, it's kind of like what Schopenhauer had said. Schopenhauer said, forget about trying to be happy, because if you pursue happiness, you'll end up unhappy. And most happiness is fleeting. Aristotle had said the best happiness comes from contemplation, from thinking, from doing philosophy, because unlike the other pleasures that wax and wane, like making the two-backed beast, you can contemplate and read and think and talk about philosophy all day long. So you can enjoy that all day long. And like all philosophers, every expert considers their field as the most important one. Percy Bysshe Shelley said the poets are the best people, the closest to God. Aristotle said the philosophers, because thinking is the most unique and godlike thing of man, that the philosophers are closest among men, the best men to God. So, whatever. But anyways, what I'm trying to say is I think Schopenhauer is basically correct. That if you have a sense of purpose, a sense of meaning, it makes your life worth it. It's sort of like you accept all the suffering and the sadness and the miseries, the setbacks, the frustrations, the disappointments, because you still have that purpose to pursue. That still makes you excited to get out of bed in the morning. So that's a very important thing, I think, for being happy and also for achieving, because you're focusing your energy on one thing so you can get meaningful achievement. Scrolling through your cell phone or your computer on YouTube, if you're just doing it in a meaningless way, you can dwindle away hour after hour, and then at the end of the day, you're sad because you wasted the day. Versus if you sought out your purpose, you'd be happy. Avoid the things that cause leaky gut, because that can lend to getting you sick, We talked about all these other things. So anyways, those are things that are important for longevity, that are not just the usual diet and exercise that we talk about so much. I hope you found that helpful.